In the Commons a little earlier. I'm joined here in the studio by Dr. AnnaJerzewska, who is a customs and trade consultant and an external advisor on Brexit policy to the British Chamber of Commerce. Welcome here to the programme. You said back in October, let me just read you the quote, there's honestly no way to do everything we need to do in 14 months, even with the best of intentions. Are you still sceptical?
Yes, very much so. What I said back in October is obviously about the Canada-style free trade agreement, which we were discussing at the time, which is the Canada plus that we keep hearing about, which is a very comprehensive agreement with services and other areas included. Now, we are perhaps slightly changing our perception of what the future trade agreement might look like, but obviously that still remains to be seen. One of the examples that I use quite often is Japan and Singapore trade agreement. So this is a trade agreement where there were no sensitive issues. There was nothing difficult within these talks, and yet the agreement took just shy of 2 years from when it started to when it was implemented.
It's interesting you say in those rather more simpler negotiations, because that's what the government here points to. They say, well, look, the starting point is there's total alignment between the UK and the EU, so it is doable within 11 months. What do you think, then, are the biggest hurdles?
There are a couple of things that will make this process a bit challenging. One of them is that, yes, there is alignment, but what that means is that anything we negotiate will be putting new barriers in place. And these barriers, these trade barriers, will have an impact on industries, on consumers, on companies. So every time something's agreed, then the UK side will then come back to London and they'll have to discuss with the general public and explain what they've just agreed to and how this will impact everyday life.
And how problematic is almost this parallel process that we might see with the UK also looking to try to negotiate a trade deal with the US? You're also having these negotiations with the EU, and divergence then becomes a crucial issue, which you tilt towards.
Very much so, and we've heard this for a number of months, that this process will be all about regulation and alignment. And that's something that Dr. Fox said this morning as well, and that's the case. There will be a choice for the UK whether we want to continue to be aligned with the EU, or do we want to do something else?
And by definition, then, does it make it more complicated if you tilt more towards the United States? Does that inevitably create more problems with negotiating with the EU?
Yes, I mean, the EU was very clear, and they said that in exchange for tariff-free access to the market, tariff-free movement of goods, what they would like to see is some sort of alignment and rules and regulation on environmental and social issues, for example.
And when you look at this before the negotiations start, what do you think is the most likely? How simple will any sort of trade deal, if they do manage it, be? Will it be without services? Will it just be certain distinct areas, do you think?
I think that's something that the government needs to decide in the next couple of weeks. It's what do we want from this trade agreement? And I think the first thing that will need to happen is to decide which direction we want to take, and then put teams and structures in place to be able to start this process. There's a lot to do in a very short amount of time.
And of course we haven't talked about, and I'll ask you as a final question, you have the Northern Ireland equation with the border down the Irish Sea effectively. How challenging is that in terms of what also has to be achieved in this time period?
Well, that's exactly the other point, is that while we'll be negotiating with the EU, potentially with the US at the same time, we still have a lot to do with the withdrawal agreement itself. There's still a lot of work to be done. Then in terms of Northern Ireland, we just have the highlights in terms of what we've agreed. We now have to put it in place and make it work. And that by itself is going to be challenging.
The detail is, as always, utterly crucial. Doctor, thank you so much for coming in, joining us on the programme and giving us that analysis. Thank you so much.